Hello everyone and welcome to another episode here of Eric's Talk, the podcast on the channel, the Zavinski Stories, and with me today is a special guest. His name is Justin. We've known each other through scouting and we've been journalists together in scouting, and today we're going to sort of cross-promote. On his channel he's done some stuff regarding PSAs on education and how it operates in the modern day, so I figured he would be a great guest to talk about the duties and what it means to be a student, specifically in the United States, because that's basically what we're going to be talking about today. So Justin, do you want to introduce yourself further?
Absolutely. Says that there's an internet connection problem. Do you have anything like that?
A little bit.
Okay, it doesn't matter.
Edit it, touch it up later.
Okay. So at any rate, my name's Justin. I live in New York. I've known Eric through scouting. I met him at NOAC. We were co-staff members, and beyond that, we are both YouTubers. Recently, I've released a skit PSA. It's really just a PSA, but it was on education reform, and it was starring me, a good friend and teacher who I went to high school with, and it's basically going to New York City now. So I'm pretty blindsided by it, because I wouldn't expect it to go that far, but yeah.
That's exciting. So tell us a little more about that. So it's been nominated for a film festival in New York?
It's been nominated for the All-American High School Film Festival. The film festival, any high school student or middle school student can submit it to a certain point for free, and there's a bunch of different categories. I submitted for the PSA category, which is, public service announcement, and it's been considered as an official selection, which in itself is a huge step for me and for the PSA, because now it's going to go on the big screen. So I'm very happy with that.
That's really cool. Yeah, and you can watch the video here too as well, because it's really cool. Is it the minute-long video that's currently on your channel?
Yeah, it's a minute long, it is on my channel.
Yep. I didn't know if there was an extended version or anything like that.
Nope.
But that's really cool. So basically, for those of you who haven't seen the PSA, you should watch it, by the way. It's the main focus was on objecting to standardized testing, correct?
Yeah, it goes along with it was supposed to generally address that, but there's the ACT, there's the SAT, and then each state, depending on where you live, will have different standardized tests and to what extent that goes to. But in terms of the state of New York, they have something called the Regents, and for all intensive purposes, because I'm oversimplifying this, the Regents are the standardized tests that are associated with the majority of courses that you take in high school, and unfortunately, New York's educational system has been ruled by standardized testing, and in my opinion it shouldn't be, and it shouldn't go so deeply into dictating what you graduate with, the prestige you get in the school, etc., etc. Again, it's a lot more complicated than this, and I've kind of oversimplified it, but for what it's worth, that's a general idea of what it is.
Yeah, you sort of need to simplify it to bring it to a larger audience, especially people who aren't currently in school. And I feel like you've had some background in this yourself, because you're like a transfer student, so has that standardized testing phenomenon sort of adversely affected you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically when I moved, I'm originally from Connecticut. I grew up in Guilford, Connecticut. That's my hometown. And when I moved to New York, I was hit completely with a truck, basically with standardized tests. They basically said, we can't take your CAPT scores, which for those of you who don't know, CAPT is Connecticut's standardized test, but that in itself you only take once. It's not every course, and once you pass it, you're done. you fulfilled the requirement. It's not every single year taking exams. But the point is that they wouldn't budge with it. They were adamant on getting test scores out of me. And on top of that, what you'll find, and I don't mean to generalize because that's not my intention, what you'll find with it is that teachers are somewhat limited to what they're teaching. For example, my physics teacher this last year, she, there was a kid who asked about, like, are we going to study black holes or anything like that, space phenomenon, how that relates to physics. And she said, well, it's not on the Regents. Why should I teach you that? We're not going to be talking about that at all. We're not going to even touch upon it. And she didn't even feel like, addressing it. And that is because, maybe in part because she really didn't want to talk about it, but in part because it's not on the test. And that's really sad that it's not about educating us, but more about getting the statistics, the metrics out of it.
Yeah, that's really sad. So it's sort of like, in a lot of cases, the curriculum is crafted for these tests and not for, like, education as a general thing.
Yeah, that's what it's gone to.
And when you were tested, when you moved, so it's almost like, were you being tested based on, like, the curriculum of the area, but you were moving into that area, so obviously you haven't had that specific education?
Educational curriculum, yeah. That was a real big difficult factor with the Regents, and I'd love to, let me just get more into that. So the way it works here, to be a little bit more specific, is that you'll have a course, all of your core courses, let's say, we'll just do the sciences, because that's pretty straightforward. You have earth science, biology, chemistry, and physics. There's an earth science region, a biology region, a chemistry region, and a physics region. And those standardized tests, depending on the score, and whether you pass them, and what they are, like if it's a physical science or a biological science, what have you, will dictate what diploma requirements you fulfill, and then that dictates the prestige you get. Basically, this goes into another thing. Let me transition. Those of you who aren't familiar with the SUNY system, what a SUNY school is, a state university of New York, and they are the college system of New York. There's over 70 SUNY schools, and they're state universities of New York. They will give you, and all the tax dollars go to pay for them. But anyway,
because for Pennsylvania we only have 14 passion schools, which is like the equivalent, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. But at any rate, the SUNY schools are willing to give you more money if you graduate with a higher diploma, and on top of that do more Regents and get higher scores. They're willing to give you more scholarship money. But if, let's say, you go to a Connecticut school or a Pennsylvania school or a Vermont school, they will not care what your Regent scores are. They won't even look at them. It's not relevant to them at all. So it's really subjective to the state of New York. And to me, it's unnecessary to do that to begin with. I mean, really, one year of tests, you pass it, and you're done. That to me is necessary, and that's it. It doesn't have to be every year. It doesn't have to be every course, and it shouldn't limit the teachers as to what they're teaching.
Yeah, it sounds like if you were trying to get into a New York school from another state, it sort of sounds like you're at a disadvantage because your regional standardized tests don't matter for admission.
That's correct. That's correct.
So that sucks.
Jumping off of that, basically, I had to start from the beginning. I had to, look at standardized tests for courses that I would have taken in 9th and 10th grade. And, mind you, I came into New York as a junior in high school. I didn't come in as an underclassman. So I was in the mix of things with that. I took, for example, with math, I took geometry in 9th grade, and they wanted me to take the geometry region. But two things with that. I took, from the perspective of my junior year, I had taken that course 2 years ago. And on top of that, New York has its own geometry curriculum. So there are topics and things discussed in that class which I had never even heard about. So then it became a struggle with, do I really need to take it? I ended up taking it, didn't do amazingly on it, don't really care by sharing that, but, being put into that situation of, taking things from a long time ago, taking things with a different curriculum, and being thrown under the bus with that was a real struggle here. Among, as a transfer student, dealing with the social aspect, which is always the most evident. But it's never as simple as that, by any means.
Yeah, it sounds very complicated for sure. So basically that's given you the inspiration and the drive to enter this contest and be like an active voice against
standardized testing
and all the state differences that really make it difficult for, say, transfer students or college applicants, etc.
Right, and Common Core has only made it more difficult with New York.
Yeah.
Basically, how it's going to work from now is they're trying to phase away the Regents, but what they're now coming up with are called Regents Common Core, and this is where it gets really confusing. So you have the Regents for current kids, and then now they're phasing in Regents Common Core, and there's going to be a point at which Regents have been phased out and Regents Common Core take its place, and it's still it's a new system. It's supposed to be Education 2.0, but it really isn't an improvement in any way.
It doesn't sound like it. And speaking from my high school days in Pennsylvania, they were actually doing something similar, I believe, with their. They were changing the standardized tests. We used to take ESSAs like throughout middle school, and then in 11th grade. But then they phased those out because those just covered like math and English, basically. And then they brought in Keystone tests, which were in each individual subject. So they just piled on more standardized tests instead of like reforming how the system worked.
Yeah, it's in part, you mentioned before, it's inspired me to enter into this film festival, make this 1-minute PSA. It's also pushed me into my current intended career of being a high school social studies teacher, of being there for transfer students, for new students, and then on top of that, working to fix the system. And that right now is my intended career. I'm right now a double major at the University of Vermont, secondary education / social sciences, and then I'm also majoring in political science. That's my current major, and that's my current intended career. And even if I don't go into the teaching path, I'll do something with probably public relations and trying to fix the system in some way, in some political way. And talking about that in the political way, unfortunately education has become a major political game as this is an election year, and for candidates to talk about getting rid of or continuing Common Core, pushing standardized tests, or reducing them, putting education in the hands of the states or in the federal government, which, on that note, just a side comment, not relevant to this, education is in the hands of the states. The federal government controls it because they have the money, so they indirectly control it because they can delegate funds as they choose to. That's just a note to your audience, because many people are confused about that. The federal government doesn't ever directly control education. It's always indirect.
Which, maybe if they had a little bit of control, things might be better, because, like you said, if people transition from state to state, then it's the educations that they're getting in their first place and their second place, they don't line up, as in your case.
Yeah.
So that makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you would honestly fix that. It'd probably be a huge process, but
yeah,
it sounds like another problem.
It is. And it really shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Yeah.
So it sounds like you would definitely consider it a duty of a student to think about their education from like an outside perspective, and not just do good in school, but maybe sort of challenge the norm and do what you're doing, because if people don't do that, obviously things aren't going to change the way they want them to.
That's definitely true. There needs to be more advocacy for education being in the hands of teachers and being in the hands of people who are not going to advocate getting metrics. because getting metrics only goes so far. And then on the flip side, you'll have parents and just general members of society complaining, well, school today doesn't really teach us to be adults. It doesn't teach us how to balance a checkbook or how to do any practical things. It teaches us the quadratic equation and sonnets of William Shakespeare. And how is that really practical in everyday life?
Yes, because it's not on the Regents.
Right. Definitely isn't. But yeah, that's another talking point there.
Yeah, and to be honest, standardized tests is just something that has become such a focus in the recent generations. But I'm not even a huge fan of tests. Period.
Yeah.
I feel like the model, because you start to think critically about this in some classes, like when you get into college, for me at least, and you sort of realize that a lot of teachers' styles are like a banking method, where the teachers deposit information into the students, and then they just perform on tests, and they don't really, the emphasis isn't on retaining information, the emphasis is on retaining it until test day.
Yeah. That's another talking point, and it's memorizing it for a test and then throwing it away, which it shouldn't be there. It should be that you learn this skill, this point, and now I'm going to retain it and have it and be a more educated member of society. But now you even have colleges that don't need to take your ACT or SAT scores. They'll just take your high school transcript and look at your GPA and your overall trends there, which that's also a good step in the right direction. Because on that note as well, that you have colleges who will give you more money possibly if you get a high score on the SAT, which is that really warranted? Does that mean you're really smart? Really, the SAT is in itself a cheat. It's how well can I be a monkey and be able to get around the tricks and answer their questions. And I understand the basic premise behind having the SAT and the ACT. It's that how can we compare someone from Syracuse, New York, to someone from Seattle, Washington? How they have two different educational systems. They're in two different parts of the United States. How can we compare a student from there to there? Having the SAT lets you do that, but is it really education? Is it really questioning you, or is it really just a gambit of tricks? That's something you have to ask yourself when you're really endorsing the SAT.
Yeah, and the SAT specifically, I always felt like it was a game of strategy. So you're really, half of it maybe is learning information. So, like, you have more information, you'll probably do better. But the other half of it is learning the skill of taking the test in general.
Yeah.
You have to take risks and say, oh, I'm not entirely sure, so do I want to answer this question and perhaps lose a quarter of a point? Or, I need to allot a certain amount of time to each question because I'm like seriously under the clock here. So I always thought it was like a game of strategy. And if you don't do well under pressure in that particular scenario, then your product of the test may make it seem like you're dumb, but really you just couldn't take the test or something.
Yeah.
Whereas I think people should just be teaching skills that aren't test taking, but that are the skills we're trying to teach.
Right.
Whether it be working in a science lab or writing a paper.
Right.
You test people on actually actively doing the skill instead of filling in bubbles. And if you can't test people in how they do something, then I think just openly discussing something, discussing a book or discussing math theory among a class, I think is a lot more active than just passively taking a test and the teacher walking around the room and saying, all right, fill in those bubbles.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
Yeah, I feel like so many people feel this way, but it's just doesn't seem like it's going anywhere.
No, it isn't. And that was, again, I already said this, but that was the whole point of making the PSA, raising awareness to the issue and kind of bluntly showing it. I haven't really talked about the PSA itself, but I'll actually, for the first time, publicly explain it, because I've actually never done a video on this. But the PSA, the deeper meaning is that you have a student in a classroom and you have a teacher proctoring a test. The student is kind of, he's obediently taking the test, and the teacher is obediently administering it. The teacher obviously is indifferent, really doesn't want to be doing it, and neither does the student. So then you see that the student's taking the test, and he looks confused, he looks stressed out, and you suddenly see this scene where you see the student on the stage in an auditorium, and he's singing, he's performing, he's showing his creative intelligence, he's showing that he is capable of performing in front of an audience. And then you see another scene while the student's taking the test, and he's in now a science classroom, and he's in front of an audience, he's talking about some science topic, he's talking to the class, and he's saying, basically, I'm taking this test and it's going to say that I have a certain intelligence, but look, I'm creative, I have academic strength, I can talk, I can perform, I can do these things, but this test is going to measure my intelligence, it's going to measure what I am to this college, or to this school, or to what diploma I'm going to get, or really to anything that it answers to. And that really is the heart of that PSA. An Easter egg in the PSA, which you might not notice, is that the green screen backings for the auditorium scene and for the chemistry or the science classroom scene, the backings are from the old high school in my hometown, and then the new high school in my hometown. It's from the old high school's auditorium and the new high school's a science classroom from there.
Okay.
And you'll notice that the green screen scenes, they have a purple border and a green border. And no one has ever questioned this, and no one has ever looked into the deeper meaning, but this is just something I hid in there. And the purple border is significant. It is symbolic of the high school I went to here in New York, because that's its school color, and then the border of the other scene, the green border, is symbolic of the high school I went to in my hometown. So that's the deeper symbolism behind that, which no one watching it would know unless I were to tell you it. But that's there, and then you ultimately see the student resolve. The camera goes back to him. He looks into the camera and says, am I really worth this? Am I a test score? And then it ends with the dialogue, education is more than testing, I am more than a test score. And that was the heart of it.
Yeah, it's a very cohesive package, and it's really good. And does the different borders, representing the two different types of performance, does that mean to show that you could be doing well in both schools? It's just that standardized testing, which is like a constant everywhere, is holding you back?
That's another point. Yeah, that definitely is. It does mean that it is applicable to any test, anywhere. Mm-hmm. And even though I included the purple and I included the green borders on the green screen scenes, I didn't ever intend it to be exclusive to me. The reason why I didn't give the student in it a name, or the teacher in it a name, the purpose of that is because I'm trying to say that this could be anyone, male or female, of any specific background, etc., etc. It could be anyone, and it can happen to anyone, and it does happen to everyone ultimately. I am just basically representing all of those people, all of what they have thought, all of what many people have thought but haven't done, and basically showing it to the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I really hope your film does well, and it's really cool that it's gotten to this level in and of itself.
Yeah, I'm very happy with it.
That's exciting. So do you know when things get passed through to like the next level, or what?
Great question. So
the
the PSA will be screened at the AMC Empire State Theater in New York City's Times Square from October 7th to the 9th. It will be screened from the 7th to the 9th, and the award ceremony is on October 9th in the city. So that's when it would win awards, if it does. I think it might, definitely for, maybe best PSA, something like that. Fingers crossed. And I'll be really happy with that because, even if it doesn't win an award, it will have gotten the awareness from people sitting down in a movie theater and viewing it. And that is, at the end of the day, a very satisfying feeling.
Yeah. I mean, you will have already accomplished getting the message out there.
Yeah.
Which is important. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, about being a student currently, are you in college right now?
Yeah, I'm going into my first year.
All right, exciting. So,
Yeah.
what school are you going to?
University of Vermont.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
And then you already said what you'll be majoring in. So, are you excited?
Am I excited? I'd say so. Yeah. It's good to start my career instead of being at the hands of politicians trying to win elections.
Yeah, very cool and very true. Yeah, I definitely think you'll probably enjoy the educational environment of college
Yeah.
a lot more than public school, which, obviously I can't say for the specific school, but
Right.
I think in general.
Yeah. I completely agree. Not to talk bad on the high school I went to, I never felt a connection with it, and I never was fond of it, and a lot of people know that. And obviously, I've already discussed in this show that I've never been fond of New York's educational system, but yeah, that's the way it is, and history is history.
Yeah. I mean, I think you'll definitely enjoy the more independence and free thinking that you'll be rewarded with.
Yeah.
When you get into some classes that encourage that. Not all do, of course. So, you obviously had to operate within the system as you were a student in your days. So, what did you sort of be like as a student? What did you do? Were you actively engaging in class, stuff like that? So what was sort of your background?
Great question. So when I was in high school, basically I always enjoyed things in science and social studies, but social studies always fascinated me more. I took this past year AP European History, and I can tell you that it was absolutely difficult, but I think that after...
I took it too.
You did? You did?
Yeah. I did.
But I can say that
I got
it's...
a 3 on it.
You did what?
I got a 3 on the test.
Yeah, I did too. I did better on AP US, but that's a side point. But at any rate, it definitely has changed my overall perspective of how the history of Europe has impacted the rest of the world, and how it ultimately ties in. Is that your brother?
Ignore him. He's stupid. Ignore him.
Is he your brother?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Alright.
Anyway, what were you saying?
What was I saying? Oh yeah, it really impacts your worldview to take that class. And just to even get in, because you mentioned we were just sharing how we did on AP European History. The AP program is one of the few good kinds of standardized tests, because if you can do well on it, you can get the credits and you can advance forward. And with me, I've gotten 6 credits from US history, which is divided between 2 courses, and that's great because I don't have to take freshman history. I also don't have to take freshman English either, which is great. But that's one of the few standardized tests that are actually useful in contrast, the contrasting viewpoint.
Yeah. Well, and about those AP tests, you have an intrinsic motivation to actually do well on them because you get college credit for them. I mean, they were, as far as standardized tests go, I always felt like at least those were worth it in the end. I mean, if SATs didn't exist, I'd still be getting into college, probably. So, I always just felt like those were actually worth it. I can get ahead because I'm putting the time in and putting all this effort into it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you were outspoken about education. Were you like a outspoken individual in class, answering questions?
Yeah. There was my statistics teacher. His name's Mr. Hodges. He won't mind being, publicly on the internet, I don't think.
Yeah.
But Mr. Hodges, he was always the kind of dude who never was in favor of standardized testing, and he never wanted to sign on to, Common Core or anything like that. But unfortunately, it was forced upon him. And he always had the kind of personality of talking about things that maybe weren't relevant to statistics, every once in a while. So we would get into, discussions and debates about, the current state of education. We, talk about things like race to the top, Common Core, what Cuomo's done with the Regents, Regents Common Core, etc., etc. And we would have these really impressive back-to-back conversations, and it would be a good time. That's actually a very memorable thing I have from high school, was talking with Mr. Hodges about the state of education.
Nice. I mean, it sounds like it's a healthy thing to have discussions and
It is.
thinking about new things that you wouldn't necessarily be challenged with in a statistics class or something like that.
Yeah, he always said, we teachers don't always get to, talk to you guys, heart to heart about, like more practical things, like, you need to learning is more than just taking the test, but it's more as to, learning the skill and, kind of getting something out of it. Maybe if it's advancing your worldview or, just becoming less ignorant, which kind of goes with advancing your worldview. That's more meaningful than just learning to take a test and then be done with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always loved my English classes for similar reasons. We always used to actually have class discussions, whether it's about the material we were discussing or about something else. It just encouraged actual thinking and knowledge. And, if you actually engage yourself in something that's not the normal curriculum, I feel like you grow, mentally. Even if you're not necessarily picking up new information the way you would typically think about it, I think you're still growing as a human being who thinks. Which, isn't that basically what we're trying to do in education?
Yeah. Not to be self-sentient. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, education is centered on the self, but so often it seems with standardized tests, it seems centered on institutions. If the government's testing you right, or if the school is performing well enough. But it doesn't. It seems like disconnected and not about students themselves lately.
Yeah, and the other thing with what states and what the federal government will do is that with the federal government, with places that have signed on to Common Core, they'll give them more funding for their state. Or, in the case of my state, New York State, school districts that do incredibly well on standardized tests will get more state funding and will thus do better. And, to me that's not fair, because, places that are historically maybe, low income and historically have issues with education in their neighborhoods, they're not going to get the money that they need to, push the programs they need to get the kids in those areas on track. And then it becomes an unhealthy kind of, I like to think of it as a toxic relationship. They never will do better because they're always on the bottom of the pyramid, if that makes any sense. They'll never move up and go beyond being, go up in the meritocracy.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense what's going on, but the fact that it's happening doesn't make sense, because it just sort of seems like a cycle where the schools who do good will do good and the schools who do bad will do bad, and it's sort of ironic that, the schools who perform well are going to get more funding to educate their children more so that they continue to do better on these standardized tests, while the schools who might actually need more resources are the ones who aren't performing well. But they don't get, the extra funding for doing well because they can, or maybe they don't.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just responding to a text. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just responding to a text.
Yeah, no problem.
At any rate, it shouldn't be about money. It shouldn't be about the metrics. I even look at it from a YouTuber's perspective. When YouTube says that we need to be thinking about what views we get and what our watch time is, and then they'll be willing to give us the better ads. Focus on those metrics rather than making good quality content that people will like, people will be entertained with. If you think about it, YouTube is centered on the metrics, much like states are centered on the metrics, if you think about it in this metaphoric way.
Yeah.
And then that ends up being that you have YouTubers who will do clickbait, YouTubers that will put a thumbnail in for 5 minutes to get it above 10 minutes, so that way they can put another ad in. They'll focus on the numbers, and then that sacrifices good videos. And then overall YouTube becomes less of a good platform to be on, which is unfortunate. So
I totally agree. It comes down to content of entertainment, content of education.
Yeah.
As long as it meets these arbitrary numbers, it's like people don't care what the actual content is, which is just it's a problem that extends to like every field of life nowadays. It's sad.
It is sad.
So, do you have any final thoughts to leave our viewers on? We definitely had some great discussion today.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, I hope that this has enlightened you, has made you think about education, and feel free to check out my channel. If you go type in Justin Schimmel, I think Eric will leave it in link in the description. You can view my PSA, 1 score for everything, and I would encourage the viewers of your channel to go out and petition your local politician to not advance standardized testing, and to obviously not vote for those politicians, whoever they are in your respective state, that wish to advance standardized testing. Because education is more than testing, and we are more than test scores.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much, Justin. Definitely go check out his channel, and podcast will be back up in the fall here. So thank you guys for watching, and Justin, I'll see you around, and thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.
Have a good summer, man. Bye.